All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to start sharing now. And I'm also going to give you a link in the chat to a folder, a Google folder with these slides and some other materials in it. And we'll also make sure you have access to that afterwards. I think we share the recording link and materials with you after the session as well. But I know some people like to get the stuff straight away. So let me add that to the chat right now. All right, so that's our folder. So welcome to Building Our Digital Mindset. Um, this session came from a conversation I had with a colleague. We were talking about, the struggle around digital literacy, and that one of the issues really is that for us as teachers, we're adult learners in the world of digital literacy. And so a lot of teachers feel nervous and struggle with how to integrate technology and how to work on digital skills, partially because it's very scary, right? Like it might not work. The day that you expect to be able to do something amazing and it doesn't work, that is not something that you would want to set yourself up for. So there are a variety of reasons why you may be feeling like you're not a techie person or you're a little timid about using tech. And so this is a session really to talk a little bit about how we can kind of shift our minds a little bit to get us more in the mind space of using technology when appropriate for teaching, but also in our own lives. So my name is Nell Eckersley, and I do work at the Literacy Assistance Center in New York City, and I'm also on the NYACCE board. And my main work in the world is around helping people think about and practice using digital skills and digital literacy and digital resilience in their instruction and in adult ed. So, what we're going to cover today, very quickly, we'll talk a little bit about digital resilience. Maybe you've heard that term. If you Google it, you'll see there are a couple of different definitions. So, we'll be looking at one specific one today, and then how that impacts digital mindset or how digital mindset impacts your digital resilience, and then some tools for us to consider when we're ready to start to build our digital mindset. Oh, my fancy animations I forgot about. There we go. Um, so to kick us off, I wanted to do a little Mentimeter. I don't know if you've done Mentimeters before, but basically if you scan that QR code with your phone or you type in that link in your phone or computer, and I'm also going to add it to the chat. Let me just I think I have to escape out of this version. Okay, let me get you the link to it in the chat too. Or you can go to menti.com and type in the code at the top there. So there's a lot of different ways to get there. And basically, what I want is to get a sense from you all about how you feel about using technology for instruction. So uh, it's going to be a word cloud, and what I'm asking you to do is add one word that describes how you feel about using technology for teaching. And if you're someone who's that's super exciting, that can be a positive thing. If it's something that's very not exciting, it could be a negative thing. That's all good. And we're going to see how folks feel. It's funny, the last time I did something like this, uh, very few words got more than one, but I think one did. So we'll see how we do today. So this is what our Mentimeter looks like. Oh, look at that, you guys. Very excited and comfortable. Very cool. So you can keep adding your answers there for a moment, and we'll just see if we get some other. This is so exciting that people are excited and comfortable and fun. But we see we have the anxious, ambivalent, and I'm sure when you are thinking of this word or how you get to the word is a little bit of a memory, right? You're remembering a situation, or maybe multiple situations, and you're responding to how you feel about that experience. Or maybe you know about some amazing tool that you find is really useful, or maybe you're someone who tried something once and it just didn't work. It's taking time away from what you consider your main purpose. Maybe you're teaching ESL or teaching ABE or GED. But this is great. These are some really great words, right? I love the intrigued, enthusiastic, curious. So that's really what we're talking about today. Whether you feel comfortable or excited or you're anxious, what we're going to work on is this idea of developing curiosity and getting ourselves to a place where we can only be so confident and comfortable with tech because it really is changing all the time. And that's kind of what we'll get to with digital resilience. So keep adding. I'm going to go back to our slides. We'll come back to this at the end and I'll add whatever the full image is to our slides before you get those. So we'll see. But this is great. It was a really exciting. I'm happy that so many people are excited, and I feel for the people that are feeling nervous. So we'll get there. We'll cover it all today. So back to our slides. So digital resilience, you know, comes from the idea, if you Google it, you will get a definition that's more about companies. Companies can have digital resilience, meaning that they're prepared for having some sort of digital nightmare, like bad thing happen. Their internet goes down, they are malware gets involved or something like that. But what we're talking about with digital resilience is really for us as individual human beings. And it's the awareness, skills, agility, and confidence to be empowered users of new technologies and adapt to changing digital skill demands. And the reason this is so important is that sometimes the way that we teach digital skills or we learn digital skills is as if you know how to log into Zoom today, you will always know how to log into Zoom. It will be exactly the same always. And that's with digital skills, digital stuff, that's never true, right? Everything changes. They like to switch the login screen to the other side of the screen, or they like to make you use biometric thing to log in, or you have to probably do multi-part authentication. So things change all the time, and usually these changes happen kind of piled on top of each other. So if you're absent for a while and you don't try something out and you come in, it can look really, really new. Where if you've been using it all along, the changes are more incremental. But we need to work on our skills to be okay with that. And that's true for our learners as well, that we are there's going to be changes. So we have to have the emotional side of this where we're kind of okay, we have some tools when we hit up against a wall. And we also need to know, where can we go get help if we need it? And we have to be open to this idea of adapting. And that all of those are frustrating, can be very frustrating in the moment of trying to do something. Um, And I bring it up here because because there is a tendency, even as a teacher teaching digital skills, that we think, we've covered Google Docs and it's done. And the reality is that it's not, it is important to teach exactly how to format a really good Google Doc, but it's also important to be explicit about how things could change, or what do you already know, or what are some things that you notice? How do we help people become more sort of independent in moving around inside these tools? So it's not just a tour guide situation. As a person who's been doing this for a long time, I know there have been many situations where I'm to the left, you'll see the login screen, and to the right is the place where you can download, and that is helpful, but it's actually more useful, and there's going to be more learning that happens when folks go in and explore it themselves and find locations. But we have to do a little bit of both, right? To make a comfortable space, but then also to add that um, challenge to make it sort of interesting. For some reason, let's go there. Okay, so digital resilience is beyond just the basics of digital literacy, right? And we're this idea of continuous learning and adaptation. Um, And then a digital mindset is actually a new term. I saw it in a couple of articles, but it's this way of considering how digital tools um, can be a benefit to what you're doing. It doesn't mean that you have to use digital tools all the time. And some of the articles are very, very, like, they go very deep into sort of like how AI can be part of your uh, job in a very sort of highfalutin way. And I'm not suggesting that. I'm really just thinking about the ways that we feel when we come towards a task that we're going to do, and whether we consider could a digital tool be a support here or helpful here? Am I not using something because I'm afraid of it, or I don't know how to use it and it's frustrating to me? And there are going to be times when that's absolutely how we're going to feel, and that's okay. But we want to notice that, and we want to kind of help ourselves get to a place where we're actually getting what we want done. And digital tools can be part of that. So a mindset is a way of thinking and orienting to the world that shapes how we perceive, feel, and act. Digital mindset is a set of attitudes and behaviors that enable us to see how data, algorithms, and AI open up new possibilities to chart a path for success in business landscape, right? This is the fancy language from Harvard, but basically it's that. How do you feel about tech, and how are you going to um, feel better about it, right? Like get to a place where it's not a scary, horrible thing. So the first thing we're going to talk, what the way that I'm coming to this is through three different ways of thinking about how our brains and our beings interact with information and things in the world. So we have a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. You probably heard that term before. Grit, you probably heard that term before. And then self-worth theory, you may or may not have heard about. And all of these impact how we interact with new information or the possibility of trying something new. So we're going to start with growth mindset and fixed mindset. Um, so growth mindset is the coming at things with a mindset where you're open to new things, that you don't have a set way, you don't believe that there's only one way things can be done. It's not even that. It's more that you don't. I think the biggest issue here is that fixed mindset tends to think that you have a talent or you don't, or you have a skill or you don't, and there's no changing of that. And what a growth mindset says is actually, I can't do it now, but I think I could do it if I had some lessons or if I could practice it. And the way it comes up often is that I have an example in my life with sewing machines. So with sewing machines, I come from a family where my mother was a sewing person, my sister's a sewing person and now owns a company that makes clothes, so like deeply into sewing, and my dear friend Tabitha, also a very good sewer. And I want to be a sewer. But every time I use the sewing machine, and this is very much a fixed mindset because I said every time I use the sewing machine, it doesn't do the thing I want it to do. And even if it does it this time, it might not do it next time. And it's so filled with bad feelings that I don't even want to do it. And every now and then I get very built up and I'm like, okay, I can do it. And I'll go and try and do it. And generally, I would say I still meet with failure. And I might have tried to buy a new sewing machine, right? I tried lots of things to help me get over this problem. And it's still a problem. The sewing machine is still like this crazy machine that it just has like ghosts in it or something, and it does weird things. So I actually was so frustrated by this that I talked to a therapist about it, and she was like, "Well, why do you want to be a sewer?" So that was question number one. And I'm like, well, because the people that I admire are sewers and I like the things that they create and I want to be able to do that. And now it's become a big thing. Like I want, now I really want to overcome this like weird fixation I have that I can't do things when normally I feel pretty able to do things. So then she's like, well, do you think these people that are really, you admire that are really good sewers, is it everything just works automatically for them, like 100% fine, like they never have to take stitches out or a sewing machine works for them perfectly every time. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, that's not true. I definitely have seen my sister and mother and Tabitha have to unstitch things or be frustrated by a pattern. And I asked both Tabitha and my sister about the sewing machines that they had to see how they had decided which sewing machines to get. And both of them sent me back hilarious emails talking about like, well, if I ever let anyone else use my sewing machine, I have to kind of come back and like reconnect with it and whatever. So like I understand that for them, they are willing to do the work, but their sewing machines are not. They are cantankerous, cranky things that are just not sort of like a one and done deal. Like you have to kind of come back in and massage it or whatever. And just speaking out loud, saying all those things helped me to see that some of my beliefs about what a good sewer is like were false. I don't, they're not even things I saw in real life. So we sometimes create these ideas. And I think with technology, we might talk about someone as techie or not techie, right? Like it's a natural skill someone was born with and I don't have it, or I'm a little bit techie. Maybe maybe we have several people here who think that they're techie too. But how we would define what a techie person is and it isn't, I think sometimes comes down more to the person having the willingness to try different things, having some experience, so they have more tools perhaps to try out. But ultimately, it's the willingness to, the belief in their ability to do it and the willingness to stay with it, even when they hit up against some sort of problem. Um, so, and this becomes very important because this belief, the bullet point number 4 here, belief leads to action and action leads to growth. If you come in, as I do with sewing machines, with a set belief, I don't even try to sew then. And then I don't practice, so I never get better. If I can move that belief out of this sort of this fixed mindset of I can never do this thing, then maybe I can get to a place where I actually take action. I practice my sewing, and my sewing gets better, and there's growth. So this is can translate over to the technology world too. Um, Also important to note that we're not just one mindset or the other. So it's not like I am just frozen in growth mindset or frozen in fixed mindset. Depending on what I had for breakfast, I might feel differently. Depending on the thing I'm using. In this area, I have a very good growth mindset. In this area, I have a very fixed mindset. So what we're really getting at is the awareness and the noticing. So when you find yourself getting into, I tend to do these like, oh, it's the same problem I've had every time. Oh my gosh. And now I'm whirling out into the world of all the bad experiences I've had in the past. If you notice yourself doing that, you can kind of pull yourself back in. There are some tools we can have for ourselves so that quickly, when we start to feel that way, we can pull ourselves back in and even maybe not get there because we have some things we can do before we get there. So awareness and maintaining our beliefs is a really important piece of developing our growth mindset around technology. So, again, it's funny reading about growth mindset without having a specific idea in my head. I laugh at some of these, right? Like failure is an opportunity to grow. Like that's a poster I want on my wall with a cat hanging from, hang in there, whatever. But when I think about it in a specific situation, like with me and sewing machines, that actually is helpful, right? That, okay, it didn't work this time, but I'm going to learn a lot more by having to go through this. So, when you're hitting up against the thing where you might want to fall into your fixed mindset about it, pulling in some of these growth mindset self-talker, self-statements things can help. So failure is an opportunity to grow would be growth mindset. Failure is the limit of my abilities. And again, like as I said, like when I'm not thinking about a specific topic and I see these terms, I find some of them very snarky. Like it's not, people have real barriers, and so it's not the idea that your failures are all to do with you and are not something society might put in the way or your own life experiences put in your way. What we're saying is if there's something you would like to achieve, we want to apply the growth mindset and not be blocked from it by our own thoughts, right? There are some real impediments in the world, but we don't want to block them ourselves. So we're going to concentrate on the growth mindset. So we have our failure as an opportunity to grow. I can learn to do anything I want. Challenges help me grow. I'm inspired by the success of others. I like to try new things. When I was doing the research for this, I was also struck by the fact that you can have a fixed mindset even if you're really successful at something, and it can stop you from wanting to do more or do the thing because you're afraid of failure and you're afraid that the success you've had all this time will evaporate somehow because you'll not be as successful as you were. So the fixed mindset doesn't always come from failure. It can come from too much success as well. Um, And we have built into us a negativity bias. So there is this idea, if we think of a situation, I have another example from my life where my mother, my sister, and I were buying my mother's first flat screen TV. And we were at, I think, Best Buy or something, and we're picking out a TV, and we are taking it out to the car. And I think that I was maybe rubbing my hands in positive anticipation of the exciting challenge that this was going to be. And my mother and my sister were not doing that. They were already thinking about how hard this was going to be, and it was going to probably not go well. Right. So they are a fixed mindset, and they do not think that this is something that's going to be at all easy to do. We get home, we unpack the box, and I quickly realize that we're missing a cord, some cable that we need. For me, again, I think I'm rubbing my hands like an opportunity to go get the right cable. I love it. My sister, my mother, like, oh, just checking off the boxes of failures, right? We get the cord, we hook it up. I still can't get it to work, and I cannot figure it out. I have to get up and walk away and think about it, and I come back and I realize this was early days in flat screen TVs. I didn't even know about the input changing thing. Like we'd had a TV before that you couldn't, you don't change your inputs. So I had to change the input, and I changed the input and it worked. And my memory of that experience was success, 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 challenges overcome. It's a very positive, rosy, beautiful picture. My sister, my mother's memory of that experience, very negative. Even though the outcome was positive, their memory was it was terrible. We knew it was going to be terrible, and it was terrible. Look at all the places where we hit up against barriers. So again, we were all having the same experience. The outcome was the same for all of us, but our memory of it, the thing that we're holding on to, very different. And so this is a part where, again, consciousness and awareness, we can maybe help ourselves do better with the positive memories or trying to turn some of our negative memories into positive memories and just recognize that our brains are really built to hold on to the negative ones. And one theory for that is that if you were living in, this is sort of a social evolutionary idea that, you were living in a village with people, and if you failed at something, that could lead you to being ousted from the village. So to protect yourself, your brain was like, don't do bad things. Don't mess up. And we don't need to do that anymore. We want actually to get to the building of new things from our experiences. So just being aware of that can help. So, to help you think about developing your growth mindset around the use of technology or whatever it is that you would like to be able to do, maybe you want to learn how to surf, maybe you want to learn how to bake a new kind of cake. We want to reflect on our successes, and we want to be nice to ourselves, give ourselves credit. We want to practice learning new things. There's a lot of talk around neuroplasticity, which is the third tab as well, but it's the idea that the brain is always changing and always can grow and can also lose parts of itself based on what you're practicing. And so learning new things helps the brain connect various parts of it that make those pathways actually stronger. And so doing it more frequently will actually help you with the bigger things later on. So even learning something small, maybe learn how to yo-yo, can be just but doing it on on a maintenance basis. So you're doing it sort of like every week you're going to learn something new. It could be very small, but it's like you're setting a path for that, and you're creating pathways, actually structural pathways in your brain. Understand that our brains actually change based on what we do, what fires together wires together. Aim low, notice small achievements, right? So sometimes we have a huge thing ahead of us, and it's very big and scary, but if we can kind of think of how to break that into smaller pieces or keep the kind of horizon line closer to now and slowly move towards it. When I was thinking about going to graduate school, the first time I thought about going to graduate school, I did lots of research and found what I wanted to do and totally freaked out. I was like, what? But what if I don't want to do that after I've done it? I don't know. This is totally scary. I'm going to put it all away. I did not go to graduate school. Then several years later, I thought about going to graduate school, and I just kept the process right here. I said, okay, I'm going to apply. And if I don't, I can still say no if they accept me. And then if they accepted me, I could still say no, right? And then till the day I was in the class, I still had the choice to say no. And I got to graduate school and I finished graduate school and it was hard, but the process of actually applying was really where I was hung up, much more so than the actual act of being a student and being in school. And we can get better. So you notice that it isn't perfect. How could it be better? What would make this better? Those are always good questions to have in our minds. We should be satisfied and also reward ourselves for achieving things, but notice when there are things that can be improved and that we can think about how we would make them better. This is so the woman who you've probably heard of with growth mindset. I'm going back to find her name. Carol Dweck, who's the researcher who's done all this work on growth mindset and fixed mindset and how it impacts our ability to learn. So she's really applying this for school-age children, but it works for adults as well. She talked about there was a school that she saw that they didn't you had to pass a certain number of competencies to graduate. But if you didn't pass a competency, they didn't fail you, they gave you a not yet on the report card. And that idea of yet is so powerful. So if you say, I do not know how to do mail merge, and then you just add yet at the end, right? It really opens up that possibility that you could learn it, right? That it is something that could happen in the future. And it really shifts things. So adding yet to the end of any kind of, negative comment or feeling you might have about something maybe can open up that feeling of like, well, but it's possible, right? I don't know it yet, but I think that's all you have to say. You don't even have to say anything more. I don't know it yet. I can't do it yet. So then we talk about grit. So that was growth mindset and fixed mindset. Now we have grit. So grit is another, kind of been making its rounds on the various podcasts and whatever that are out there, and it comes from a book by Angela Duckworth called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. And we see it here. I include it here because this is about perseverance, right? Passion and perseverance are a huge piece of how you move forward in the thing that you're interested in doing. So it doesn't have to be huge passion and huge perseverance when we're talking about teaching with digital tools or using digital tools in our lives, but it's noticing that that's something we really want to do. So we have a finite amount of time. We have a variety of things that take our attention that we can't even control. But with the time that you have available to you, what is it you would like to do? It might not be technology, it might not be digital stuff, it might be something else, but notice that that's your passion. And how do you move forward in that? How do you get to a place where you want to be with that particular interest or skill or whatever? Um, so again, this again fits into the reason why we might not persevere or not even admit our passions is because of this fear of failure, and that our brains protect us when it senses that we have a fear of failure by creating a fear of shame. So it kind of doubles up on our kind of first experience of something where we're afraid that we might fail, then the brain doubles down and gives us the fear of shame. And how can we get ourselves out of that? Well, sometimes that is where you talk, as I was talking about with my therapist moment, right? What makes you want to do it? What do other people who you think are good at doing it are? And what would be the worst situation? The sewing machine bursts into flames. With technology, often people are very afraid of, I might push the wrong button and everything will disappear, or I'll come to class and I tried to turn on the projector and it doesn't work, and I don't know what to do. I don't know. I have no way to get around that, and now my whole lesson is gone. By getting into the real fears, the little piece fears of that, you can maybe either fix some of those things or at least make it more rational, rather than the sort of just giant kind of unknown stuff. And observe the voice that tells you to stop or give up. And this idea that we tend to do that out of this fear, and it is actually, you trying to be nice to yourself, But in reality, it's a limiter, and we could turn that around and make it into an inner coach. How would you speak to your best friend if they were telling you all of this stuff? You would probably be an inner coach for them or be a coach for them. So figuring out how, a coach doesn't just tell you good job all the time. They give you helpful information for how can we get to where we want to go. So if you find that you're hearing that voice say to you, I'll never get it to work, I'm just not techie, failure, just like last time, I say all these things around sewing machines. Um, the one of the videos I was watching, she talked about your K-crap radio. So this is your K-crap radio telling you all these things that are negative, and we want to turn that volume down. We want to get that positive voice in there. So just again, that's going to happen. Our brains are built to do that. So we have to use another part of our brain to consciously bring us back and be like, we're not listening to that voice. Instead, we're going to listen to this other voice, or we're going to turn up the volume on the other voice at least. And then the last one, so we've talked about uh, growth mindset and fixed mindset, grit as a concept for how we persevere when we do come up against an obstacle. And now we have self-worth theory. And self-worth theory, in this case, is around why we procrastinate, which I think is another piece of this, right? So, why don't I do the things I want to do? I said I wanted to sew. I'm afraid of the sewing machine. And now I'm stopping myself from even going there and trying it out. And how do we step through that barrier that we've created for ourselves? So we all procrastinate in various parts of our lives. And the idea from self-worth theory is that the reason we get to a procrastination point is that we have two drives. We have a drive for success in this case and a drive for failure, to avoid failure. And when those two things are equally large or equally balanced, we procrastinate. We are afraid of the power, or the worst thing that could happen if we tried to do this thing is we could fail. And that fear is as big as our desire to be successful. And many people, this is Nick Vosge, who is a professor at Princeton, and he talks to students about this, particularly with the idea of students procrastinating around homework. Um, and I think probably there have been a lot of articles around procrastination that it's not laziness, but there's a variety of thoughts about why we do it. And certainly I've seen it in myself that, there was a report I had to do every month. I knew I had to do it every month. The 15th of the month, that report was due. And the joke in the office became, Nell was cleaning the floor with a toothbrush because she'd do that before she wanted to go and write this report. She'd still write the report, she'd still send it in, but I'd do it the night before. So if it wasn't so good, I'd already kind of set myself up for, it could not be good, and that's okay because I just did it the night before. Versus I really, really, really honestly, truly worked on this super hard and then it wasn't successful. That is very scary. So we have to watch those moments. We can sometimes shift ourselves out of them if we can kind of see what is it that we're afraid of? What is the balance? What is the thing that is making our motivation static because we're stuck in this equally weighted situation. So there are some strategies for overcoming this. And again, mostly it's about awareness. So you're noticing that I notice I should be writing this report, and I notice that I'm really drawn to the toothbrush washing the floor. What's going on? So some ways to tip the balance. Think of the challenge as an opportunity and an experiment. Experiment for me is very powerful. This report was annoying because it was so poorly, the requirement was stupid and the things I had to say didn't fit into it and it was very annoying. Okay, so could I change that some way? And how could I not take it so like it's the most important thing in the world? I'm making it into an experiment. How does the challenge fit your mission? You have a mission, or maybe multiple missions, but you have things that you want to do in the world. You want to uh, decrease suffering. You want to make people happier. You want to, I don't know what your mission might be, but how does this fit that? And maybe that can help you move forward through this space because you can see the importance of doing it. And that can just jog you over. Making the challenge small also. So, it's not, I'm not going to live or die by this report. You do it every month. Just, I kind of feel like this fits me with, I grew up brushing my teeth, but not flossing as a child. I grew up, that was just what our family did. You brush your teeth, but there was no flossing. And now I'm supposed to floss. And every time I go to bed, I brush my teeth without thinking about it. But if I say, well, today, you should really floss, that's a conversation. Like my brain gets involved and there's like, well, but if you didn't do it today, you could do it tomorrow. Or if you did it today, maybe that's all you need to do. Like there's all this conversation. It's like, no, there's no conversation. You're just doing it. That is another place where I think comes here, where you can just, the brain is having a lot of conversations and we just need to shift where we're listening or help some voices get louder than others that maybe we're used to doing it the other way. Um, just know that performance does not equal ability, and ability does not equal your worth, and that's where the self-worth piece of this comes in. So sometimes that can also just lower the feeling of weight that can come with certain things. So whether this is around technology, all the things we're talking about today don't have to be about technology. They could be anything in your life. And if you notice in your life areas that you feel um, powerful in and feel like you actually are really good at that thing, notice how all of this fits into that part of your life. So may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. Right? We live in a world and a time when it's very easy to be very fearful and to have a lot of concerns. And it's not that we have to ignore those, but we need to kind of help ourselves shift over, remind ourselves what our hopes are and what we would like to see happen as much as don't be borrowing from the fear side of it. So I've done this as a longer workshop and we would have broken out now into groups and you guys would have talked to each other a little bit about situations where you notice that you have applied a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, places where you feel really able and successful, and places where you might feel challenged or limited. I'm using here technology, but it might not be technology in your own experience. So we're not going to take time to do that, but I do want to take a moment for you to think a little bit about that, and you don't have to write it down, but do think in your life of sort of the two extremes, right? Something where you feel incredibly able, successful, and someplace where you feel very vulnerable and don't consider yourself successful and don't see that you're able to do something. And think a little bit about how growth mindset and fixed mindset, grit, and self-worth theory play into those two extremes and how your body even feels, right? If I begin to think about places I feel successful, I feel warm. And when I start to think about places where I feel like I failed or cannot overcome whatever the obstacle is, I get cold. I get shivery. It's a very quick response. Like we have a full body response to these experiences. So take a moment to think about that in your own life. If it's about technology, think about that with technology and why do you feel really good about technology, or why is it challenging to you, and what could be some supports you need. So we're going to take 1 minute, 1 minute for you to think about that. I'm going to check the chat. And you're welcome to share things in the chat if you want to, but this is really for you and for you to think a little bit. Sometimes it's nice if you share because other people can see what you're saying and they have a similar experience. I told a few of my stories. So again, I'm going to give us another 30 seconds and then we'll come back and continue on. All right, I'm going to continue us on. So these are ways to think and help ourselves no matter what we're talking about, not specifically around technology. The next piece here, oh, this is, yeah, so this is something that happened for me. So, I have this issue around sewing machines, and so I was Googling memes. And here's a beautiful meme about the truth about sewing, and like, this is all hard for everybody. And then I also found this one. Aw. So maybe just finding a meme for whatever it is that you are dealing with helps you recognize that you are just part of a general thing in the world, and it's actually a fun joke instead of being a scary you alone situation. Okay, so we started off by talking about digital resilience and that we want to bring our digital mindset in to help us. Really, the idea of that digital mindset is to support our resilience, right? Is so that when we do decide that technology is something we want to work with, that we have some tools to help us get there because we know we're going to hit some impediments. So developing digital resilience for you as a person, you as a teacher, your learners, for all of us, for the whole of humanity, it's built through opportunities to solve problems and experience success. But the success comes from solving a problem, right? And it might not be that the whole problem is solved. It might just be part of it, but noticing the success along the way. It's strengthened by increased confidence and belief in oneself. So self-awareness is how we've just been going through. So we need all of that to be part of ourselves for this digital resilience. And then it's supported by the development of helpful habits and self-awareness and skills, right? So experience is such a huge piece of this. I know there was I think people still use these terms, digital native and digital immigrant, and I don't like those terms because I don't feel like it's a little fixed mindset-y for me, where you're one or the other. But what I will say is that the amount of experience you've had, the experiences you've had, obviously impacts your ability to move forward with something new, right? So I remember, I think Facebook changed its icon for camera or something, and a colleague of mine who'd not been using it for a long time came in and was like, "What? This doesn't even, I don't even understand this." And for me, it wasn't so startling because I had stayed with it, and so the incremental piece where over time, whatever the thing was had changed. It had changed a little bit every time, so from, 2 years ago to now was a big change, but if you'd been doing it all along, the changes were not so big. So having experience, thinking through how things work a little bit, all of those are helpful. And we can develop those. It does take time and it does take, you have to decide that's what you're using your time to do. Or maybe you're deciding not to. Um, We're not going to take time to do this now, but you'll have this. But this is a digital resilience I can statements for teachers. So one of the things about digital skills, and maybe you guys have come up with some solutions for this, is assessment is not something that's very, we don't have a lot of assessments for digital skills. So we can have self-attestation. Someone can say, I can't do the things I want to be able to do. We have North Star digital assessment, which I'll talk about in a moment, which I know the state maybe has access to now, and some programs have purchased it for themselves. And that's a series of assessments that will test you very specifically on their standards to outline what skills you need, but at the very base level. So some programs use that as their sign that students have gotten what they need, and teachers can take those tests as well. And there's a sort of, you get a certificate if you pass it. So you can be, you can get a North Star certificate. Other programs have chosen to go kind of more into a real deep certification, maybe the Microsoft certification or some in a very specific tech tool. You could be certified. But these I can statements have also been kind of a new way of handling, creating sort of a pre and post sense of how people are doing. So you can have this as a pre survey and find out where folks are, and then you can make sure that you're including in your lessons things that will target the specific standards or skills that are listed here. And then at the end, people take the survey again and see where they are compared to where they were before. And so it can help you know where your gaps are, what you want to be able to do. this set of I can statements came from, so this is North Star. Let me just move forward for a second. So Bridges Digital Resilience Toolkit is a set of tools that has been created by World Education EdTech Center based on the Seattle Digital Initiative Digital Skills Framework, which you may have heard of. So the Seattle Digital Equity Initiative Digital Skills Framework has 10 areas, 10 domains of skills. And Seattle developed that by looking at a variety of other tools. So it's become one of the ones we go to because it sort of synthesizes a few different ideas around digital standards, digital skill standards, and frameworks. So based on that, Bridges is now created resources around these 10 different domains and some ways to think through them. And so that teacher survey goes through those 10 domains and outlines actual activities. So if we go, we can just look at it for a second because we're going to run out of time. So um, one of the domains is communication skills. So communicate, and these were the skills asked about in this particular survey are specifically thought to be of higher need for teachers. Communication skill number 2, I can create a slide presentation file and share it with students so they can each create a slide about themselves. And then you can say, it's easy, I might need to look out the answer, or I have no idea, or I'm going to run screaming from the room. And you could go through all of these and then get a sense of where you are, or you could find out where your learners are, or if you're working with a whole program, maybe you could have all your teachers do this, and then identify the places where, and I have to say this is an interesting one. I'm going to tell you this even though you haven't taken the survey yet, but when I do this survey, if you see answers 2 and 3, they're actually very related. Might need to look up the answer and no idea. No idea is a little bit more extreme, but really looking up the answer might mean that you have no idea. And so this is a bit of a growth mindset, and this is a little bit of a fixed mindset. And when I've done the survey, a lot of folks do the might need to look up the answer, but every now and then on one of the questions where like something is completely bizarre, definitely have never heard of it before, or it seems very complicated, sometimes people will say no idea. And to me, that's a moment to notice that, wow, I can't even begin to think about that. Whew, can I shift that into, oh, I wonder how you would do that. And that actually is a funny, my husband, when we cook together, will say, what do you think would happen if we added olives to the cake? No. And I will say, no, that's not a good idea. But what would happen if is a good way to think a little bit about technology and notice where you've created sort of these firm lines and be like, well, what would happen if I did this? Maybe it would work. Maybe it could do it a different way. Okay, so that's what those I can statements come from. Um, North Star Digital Assessments, these are their standards, and the different assessments are on each of these different groups. They also have a list of standards very similar. I mean, everything kind of overlaps. I think the North Star standards are very explicit. Um, so you're getting down to like the nitty gritty of like, I can use the mouse to log into a website or something like that, where the Seattle and the Bridges ones are a little bit more vague. So again, these are good for you to know about if you want to consider using them with your learners, but also for your own skill sets, right? I took the digital footprint assessment from North Star, and it tells you standards passed and standards to improve, right? So you get a very quick snapshot of the things that you need to work on. And then they have some online resources so you can learn things right there, or you can also just look for them elsewhere in the world. Bridges will have some of that as well. They also have this nice checklist, and notice the not yet, right? We talked about yet earlier. So they're going with that same idea. I can set up an email account. Yes, I can, maybe, or not yet, but not no. Um, So one last thing is instructional routines as a way of helping us bring in sort of the habit of using technology, both by creating certain activities that we're always going to do a Kahoot on Fridays. You know, when I introduce new vocabulary, we were always going to practice highlighting on a PDF, whatever, so you have certain things that you're just going to use as a part of the process for doing a particular lesson or part of your lesson. The idea of routines is that people in the beginning, I mean, my experience with Kahoot, I played it, I loved it when someone else was setting it up. But when I set it up and I tried to use it, I felt like a failure. People were very reticent to use it. It felt like a lot of work to get people on and figure it out. And if I'd been working with the same group of students for a period of time, by the third time we used it, it would have been easy, right? So sometimes we need to repeat things to get that sense of ease, and then we can really get into what the point of the Kahoot is, which is to, practice our knowledge. So the act of using the Kahoot is not actually the main thing. It's what the Kahoot does for us. If you've never used Kahoot, it's a online game that you can create where people have to choose multiple choice question answers, and it's a lot of fun, but it takes a little while to get everyone ready to do it. Um, there are some places to go look for instructional routines, and they're slightly different. So the Adult Numeracy Network, for example, has some instructional routines that they've created for math specifically, but it tends to have math stuff has a lot to do with tech folks too. So a lot of our stuff can work both in both places. Um, So this is a common math one. What do you notice? What do you wonder? So in this case, I could be doing my tour guide version of here's two different types of Google files, two Google tools. And if I was working with learners, instead of just coming in and being like, and you'll notice that if you go to the top of the drop-down menu, you can open the file, or you can, in the third area, we can rename it. Instead of me telling you that, we could have a conversation with like, well, what do you notice about these two? What tools do you think they go with? One of the things that comes out of this particular activity is realizing that if you are very familiar with one tool, you might actually know a lot about another tool already. There's only a few differences. And what are those differences and why are they there, right? So in this case, the top ones are kind of all the same. Share, email, download, and approvals. Well, why would there be approvals for this particular one? So you could have this conversation before we even get into the tool, and it just gets people kind of ready to actually go in there and click around. So there are a lot of resources here. You'll get, like I said, a copy of the folder, and that will have these slides, and inside the slides, you have all these resources. That's my contact information. I'm going to stop being in slide mode. And we're right up against the clock, but if anyone has any questions, in fact, I'm going to stop sharing. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. And Anna Mary Pino, I see your beautiful post in the chat, right? Can you remember, we were talking about that the other day, like the difference that, I mean, the pandemic was a very terrible thing, but for a lot of us, it meant that we really jumped into, we passed through that whole procrastination and whatever, and we had to just do it. And you did it, right? And it was a struggle. I mean, I think we can remember, like, I remember the first time I was going to do, I physically can remember like being so nervous to do a workshop on Zoom. And within 3 weeks, 2 weeks even, I was like, oh, I do that. That's who I am. I do things like that.
Yeah. One thing that I felt that was really interesting, that we were all in the same boat,
Yes,
like
that's true too.
teachers and students. So there was no mistakes. Was just like let's do it again.
It's the best we can do.
Let's
And
see if it works.
if you see, like, that's a lot of what the idea of grit and the idea of self-worth theory and all those things come from that, right? Like we just have to do it.
Yeah,
Everybody's sort of equal, and that's true in our classrooms too. In fact, for digital resilience purposes, it's actually great when you do have a problem, so you can talk out loud
exactly.
about what the problem is, and maybe someone in the room has answers, or they'll watch how you come up with, well, I guess I could Googling, I think people in my office think I'm techie, and the reality is I'm a good Googler.
I think me too, because everything I learned Googling.
Exactly, and you learn it when you need it, which is an amazing opportunity.
And I heard this ad. I think Sunday. That is, it's an AI thing, and the ad it goes like, "This is a bad time to be a problem." Like solutions are everywhere.
They
Just
are. You're not going to be a problem for long. We have so many tool ways to get there. So then we get into, how do you decide if it's good information? Like when you're getting a good result, I find my AI sometimes doesn't give me actually what it makes things up, but I know that, so I can go search elsewhere too. So again, showing all that to your learners is great.
and that ties with the SOL too, because it all starts with the words,
Yes.
or all starts with the vocabulary and how you use to find the right information, how you search. It's all about the language.
And thank you for that, because that's actually a huge piece of like the very, very base level of digital skills is being able to talk about the problem you're having. So really practicing all that vocabulary. And the North Star assessments are really good for you getting that vocabulary because they will use all those words and you're like, I don't know what that is. Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you all so much for being here
Thank you.
today. And we will follow up with both the slides and the recording. And I hope that you'll come to a lot more lunch and
Yeah.
learns.
Thank you, Nell. That was really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care,
Nell.
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone, for
Yeah.
attending
Bye,
it.
everybody.
Thank